There are nights I sit by the window, long after midnight, when the house is quiet and the world feels far away. I listen to the wind move through the trees, and sometimes, I think I can hear the echo of who I used to be. The girl I once was, full of dreams, laughter, and foolish hope, she still lives somewhere inside me. And every now and then, she whispers, asking me why I did what I did. People say time heals everything. But time doesn't heal what you keep buried. It only hides it under new days and quiet routines. And I've spent years trying to bury the truth under being a mother, a wife, a woman who looks like she has her life together. But deep down, I know one thing. If my daughter ever found out the truth, if she knew what I did all those years ago, she would never look at me the same again. Love can be beautiful, but it can also be cruel. It can make you feel alive and destroy you at the same time. When I was young, I thought love could fix anything. I thought love was enough to make pain disappear. But I learned that love can also be the reason you lose everything. People look at me now and see calm eyes, a steady voice, a woman who's lived a full life. They don't see the nights I cried myself to sleep. They don't see the letters I burned before anyone could read them. They don't see the lies I told, not out of hate, but out of love, desperate, blind love. Tomorrow, my daughter is coming home. She doesn't know it yet, but she's walking straight into the truth I've been hiding for more than 20 years. And no matter how hard I pray, I know the past has a way of finding its way back. I wasn't always this woman. I wasn't always quiet or careful. Once I was bold. I was 23, living in a small town in Georgia, working as a nurse's assistant at the county hospital. Life was simple then. My days were filled with long hours, kind faces, and small dreams. I wanted to save enough money to finish nursing school, maybe move to Atlanta one day, start a new life. And then I met him. His name was David. He wasn't from town. He was a contractor, helping rebuild the east wing of the hospital after a storm had damaged it. The first time I saw him, he was standing outside the cafeteria, talking to one of the doctors. He had this quiet confidence about him, the kind that draws you in without even trying. He smiled at me, and for a second, I forgot how to breathe. It wasn't one of those movie moments. It was small, simple. But something inside me shifted. Over the next few days, I kept running into him. Once in the hallway, once at the coffee machine, once outside near the parking lot when I was waiting for my ride. Each time, we said a little more. A few words turned into full conversations. He asked about my work, my family, my dreams. He listened like no one ever had before. David was older than me by almost 10 years. He'd been married once, but his wife had left him years ago. There was sadness in his eyes, but also kindness. He was funny in that quiet, careful way men are when they've seen too much of life but still hope for something gentle. I told myself it was just friendship. That there was nothing wrong with talking. But the truth is, I started waiting for him every day. I'd find reasons to walk by his work site. I'd make excuses to grab coffee at the same time. I knew it was dangerous, but I couldn't stop. He made me feel seen. For the first time in my life, I wasn't just somebody's daughter, somebody's coworker, somebody's responsibility. I was me. One evening, after my shift ended, it started to rain hard. My ride didn't show up, and I was stuck outside with no umbrella. David was still at the site, checking the equipment. When he saw me standing there, soaked and shivering, he ran over and offered me a ride. We sat in his old truck, the sound of rain hitting the roof. I remember how quiet it was. The smell of wet soil, the hum of the engine, and his voice, soft, steady, asking if I was okay. That's when it happened. He looked at me, and I looked back, and something broke loose inside me. He leaned in slowly, giving me a chance to stop him. But I didn't. I couldn't. And when he kissed me, it felt like the world had gone still. That kiss was the beginning of everything, and the end of who I used to be. After that night, we started meeting in secret. A small diner outside town. A quiet walk near the lake. He'd call me from a payphone, just to hear my voice. Every stolen moment felt like a lifetime. I told myself it was love. I told myself it was fate. But there was something I didn't know, something that would destroy everything. One afternoon, I saw him standing by his truck, talking to a woman I recognized. She was one of the hospital's senior nurses. A woman named Carol. She looked worried, angry even. When she saw me, she turned away quickly. David followed her, trying to calm her down. I didn't know what to think. That night, I asked him who she was. He said she was an old friend. He looked tired, almost guilty, but I wanted to believe him. So I did. Because that's what love makes you do, believe the story you want to be true. Weeks passed, and the guilt started creeping in. My mother always told me that a woman's heart knows when something isn't right. And deep down, I knew. But I kept going. I kept meeting him. Then one evening, he told me something that shattered me. Carol wasn't just a friend. She was his ex-wife. They were trying to work things out, for a while at least. But he said he couldn't let me go. He said he loved me, that what we had was real. I remember sitting there, unable to breathe. My hands were shaking. I felt foolish, small, used. But even then, part of me still loved him. That's the worst part of love, it doesn't disappear just because it hurts. I told him it had to end. He begged me not to go. He said he'd fix it, that he'd make things right. But I couldn't believe him anymore. I walked away that night, crying all the way home. A week later, I found out I was pregnant. I remember standing in that tiny bathroom, holding the test in my hand, staring at it for what felt like hours. My heart was pounding, my legs shaking. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know who to tell. When I finally told David, he went silent. He looked at me like he'd been punched in the chest. Then he said, "We'll figure it out." But there was no strength in his voice. No plan, no promise. A few days later, he stopped answering my calls. His number was disconnected. When I went to the hospital, his work site was empty. He was gone. I never saw him again. I tried to find him for weeks. I called every number I could, asked everyone I knew. Nothing. It was like he had vanished. I told myself he'd come back. That he just needed time. But deep down, I knew he wasn't coming. So I made a choice. A choice that still haunts me to this day. I left that town. I packed a small bag, told my mother I got a new job in another city, and disappeared. I wanted to start over before anyone found out. When my daughter was born, I named her Grace. Because she was the only good thing that came from all the pain. I promised myself I'd protect her from everything, especially from the truth. I built a new life, a new story. I told everyone her father had died in an accident. I thought if I said it enough, maybe I'd believe it too. But lies have a way of finding cracks to slip through. And now, 25 years later, those cracks are starting to show. Tomorrow, Grace is coming home. She's been digging into our family history for a project. She doesn't know that the man she's been researching, the man she thinks is just part of a small-town story, was the man I once loved. The man who left me. The man who never knew he had a daughter. And now she's about to find out everything. I can feel it in my bones, the past is knocking, and this time, it won't go away quietly. After Grace was born, my world became small, just her and me. I didn't have anyone else. Northwest family close by, no man beside me, no one to share the long nights with. But somehow, that tiny baby made me feel like I could still breathe, still keep going. She was the only thing that made sense anymore. I rented a small apartment in Savannah. It wasn't much, a one-bedroom place with peeling wallpaper and a leaky sink. But it was ours. Every morning, I'd watch her sleep in that little crib by the window and tell myself that everything I'd done, every lie I'd told, was worth it if it meant she'd grow up safe. I went back to work as soon as I could. It wasn't easy, working double shifts at the nursing home while raising a baby alone. Some nights I came home so tired that I'd cry in the shower, just to let it out without waking her. But every time I looked at her tiny face, I found strength again. I didn't have much, but I had her. And that was enough. At least, that's what I told myself. But love doesn't just disappear. It hides. It waits. It sneaks back in when you least expect it. One afternoon, when Grace was about 3 months old, I was leaving work when I saw a man standing by the bus stop. My heart almost stopped. For a second, I thought it was David. Same height, same broad shoulders, the same way of standing with one hand in his pocket. I froze, my breath caught in my chest. But it wasn't him. Just a stranger who happened to look like the ghost I couldn't forget. That night, I dreamed of him. I dreamed of his voice, his hands, his promises. And when I woke up, I hated myself for still missing him. I tried to move on. I really did. But some loves leave a mark that time can't wash away. I told myself he didn't deserve my tears. Yet some part of me still waited for a letter, a call, something to say he hadn't forgotten me. But silence was all I got. Years went by. Grace grew fast, her first steps, her first words, her first day of school. She was smart, curious, full of light. She used to ask me about her father sometimes. I'd tell her he was gone before she was born. That he was a good man who loved her very much. And then I'd turn away before she could see the truth in my eyes. When she was 8, she came home from school one day holding a drawing, a family of 3, a mom, a dad, and a little girl. She handed it to me and said, "I made this for you, Mama. So you can remember what our family looks like in heaven." That broke me. I smiled, kissed her forehead, and cried in the bathroom for an hour. I worked hard, kept my head down, and gave her everything I could. By the time she was a teenager, I was managing the nursing home's front desk. Life wasn't perfect, but it was steady. We had peace. Until one day the past found me again. It was a rainy Thursday evening. I was sorting files at work when I heard a voice behind me say, "You still like your coffee black?" For a moment, I thought I was dreaming. My hands went cold. I turned around, and there he was. David. He looked older, worn down. His hair had streaks of gray, his eyes carried years of regret. But it was him. The same voice, the same face that haunted me for years. I couldn't speak. I just stood there, frozen. He said, "I looked for you, you know. 4 years. You left without a word." I laughed, a dry, bitter laugh. "You looked for me. You disappeared first." He lowered his head. "I know. I made mistakes. Carol got sick and things got complicated. By the time I tried to find you, you were gone. I even went to your old place, but your landlord said you'd moved." I wanted to hate him. I wanted to tell him to leave. But part of me still felt that pull, that same soft ache that had never really gone away. He told me he'd been living in Charleston, working construction again, divorced now, and alone. He said he still thought about me, about what we had. I didn't know what to say. I told him I had a daughter now. He smiled, asked how old she was. I lied and said she was 7. I couldn't bring myself to tell him the truth. Not yet. We met again the next week. Then again the week after that. I told myself it was just closure, just 2 people trying to make peace with the past. But deep down, I knew it was more than that. I was falling again, and I hated myself for it. He wanted to see Grace. He said he had a right to know her. But how could I explain? How could I tell my little girl that the man who left us was suddenly back? That he was her father? I couldn't. So I lied again. I told him she wasn't his. That she was from someone else. The look on his face when I said that. I'll never forget it. He looked broken, like I'd hit him in the heart. He didn't argue. He just nodded slowly and said, "If that's what you need to believe, I understand." I watched him walk away in the rain, and I wanted to call out, but I didn't. I just stood there, holding back tears. A week later, I got a letter in the mail. No return address. Just my name. Inside was a single photo, me, holding Grace as a baby, and a note that said, "I always knew. I forgive you." That was the last time I ever heard from him. 2 months later, I saw his obituary in the newspaper. Car accident outside Charleston. He was gone, for real this time. I sat on the floor, holding that paper, and something inside me cracked open. I'd spent so many years lying to protect myself, to protect Grace, and now it all felt so useless. The one man who could have given her the truth was gone forever. For a long time, I couldn't stop thinking about that note, "I forgive you." I didn't know if he meant for leaving, for lying, or for loving him. Maybe all of it. But I couldn't forgive myself. The guilt started eating me from the inside. Every time I looked at Grace, I saw him. The shape of her smile, the way she tilted her head when she laughed, it was him. And every time she asked about her father, I lied a little more. I started keeping a journal, letters to him, letters to Grace. Things I couldn't say out loud. I hid them under the floorboard of my bedroom. I thought maybe one day, when I was gone, she'd find them and understand why I did what I did. But secrets have a way of slipping out. When Grace was 16, she came home one afternoon holding an old photo she'd found while cleaning the closet. It was one of me and David at a construction site, laughing, holding coffee cups, back when everything was new. She asked, "Who's this, Mama?" My heart stopped. I could feel the blood leave my face. I said he was just a friend from work, long before she was born. She looked at me strange, like she didn't believe me, but she didn't push. She just said, "He looks like someone who made you happy." Then she walked away. That night, I took the photo and burned it in the sink. The flame curled the edges until his face disappeared in the smoke. I thought that was the end of it. But it wasn't. Years passed. Grace went to college, moved to Chicago, built her own life. We talked often, but there was always a distance between us, something unspoken. Maybe she felt the weight of my secret without even knowing it. Now she's 30, working as a journalist. And a few weeks ago, she called me and said, "Mama, I'm doing a story about people who built the old Savannah Hospital. I found some names, one of them is David Carter. You ever heard of him?" My hands went numb. I told her I didn't remember anyone by that name. She laughed and said, "Funny, I found an old file that has your name listed next to his." I didn't answer. I just said I had to go. That night, I sat in my room, staring at that same old wedding photo by my bed, and I realized something. I'd spent my whole life running from a truth that was now walking straight back to me in my daughter's hands. I whispered into the dark, "Lord, please, don't let her hate me when she finds out." But deep down, I already knew the storm was coming. When Grace told me about that story she was working on, the one about the old Savannah Hospital, I felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. My chest went tight, my throat dry. For days, I couldn't think about anything else. Every word she said that day kept echoing in my mind. David Carter. Hearing his name after so many years felt like hearing a ghost speak. I hadn't said his name out loud since the day I burned that photo. I thought I had buried every piece of him. But here he was again, coming back through my daughter's work, through history, through fate. That night, I couldn't sleep. I walked around the house, touching old things that suddenly felt alive again. The table where I used to feed Grace. The corner where her crib used to be. The photo frame by the window. Everything felt heavy with memories. I knew she'd start digging deeper. Grace was always curious, always searching for answers. As a child, she used to take things apart just to see how they worked, toys, clocks, anything. She once told me, "Mama, I can't stand not knowing." That same curiosity made her a great journalist. But now, it was about to destroy the wall I'd built my whole life around. 3 days later she called again. Her voice sounded excited. "Mama, you won't believe this," she said. "I found an old construction photo from the hospital archives, from the year 1997. There's a woman in the picture who looks just like you." My heart skipped a beat. I tried to sound calm. "Oh? Must just be someone who looks similar." She laughed softly. "I don't think so, Mama. I showed it to one of my friends and she said the same thing. She said it's definitely you. Same smile, same eyes." I stayed quiet. She went on, "The man standing next to you, that's David Carter. The project files say he was the lead contractor. He died in a car accident not long after. Isn't that strange?" I gripped the phone tighter. My hands were shaking. She said, "I think I'm going to Charleston next week. I want to talk to his family. There might be more to his story than people knew." My heart dropped. "Grace, honey, you don't need to do that. Some stories are better left alone." She paused. "You sound nervous." "Why?" "I'm not nervous," I lied. "I just don't want you wasting your time on old ghosts." She sighed. "Mama, this is what I do. You've always told me to chase the truth." I wanted to tell her the truth right then, everything, but I couldn't. I wasn't ready to lose her. After that call, I sat on the floor for a long time, shaking. I realized that the secret I'd carried for so long was finally slipping out of my hands. A week later she came to visit. It was a Saturday afternoon. I was in the kitchen when I heard her car pull up. When she walked in, I saw something in her eyes, something sharp, searching. She hugged me, but it felt different. We sat at the table, drinking tea. She started talking about her trip. She said she went to Charleston, just like she planned. "I found his sister," she said quietly. "She still lives there." She told me he used to talk about a woman he loved once. Said she disappeared one night and never came back. I looked down at my cup. My hands were trembling. She showed me a box of his old things, Grace continued. Photos, letters, keepsakes. One of the letters had your name on it. I froze. Grace looked at me carefully. It said, "To Evelyn, wherever you are. I hope you and our child are safe." The room went silent. The clock ticked loudly on the wall. I couldn't breathe. Finally, I whispered, "Grace." She shook her head. "I just need to know, Mama. Please don't lie to me. Was he my father?" The question I'd feared for 30 years was finally standing in front of me, wearing my daughter's face. I wanted to tell her everything, how I'd loved him, how he left, how I tried to protect her. But the words stuck in my throat. I said softly, "It's complicated." She looked at me like I'd slapped her. "It's not complicated, Mama. It's a yes or no question. Was he my father?" Tears filled my eyes. I nodded slowly. "Yes." The air left her body. She leaned back in the chair, staring at me like she didn't know who I was anymore. "Why didn't you tell me?" she whispered. "Because I wanted to protect you," I said. "I didn't want you to grow up with his mistakes. I wanted you to have a clean start." Her voice cracked. "You lied to me my whole life." "I did it out of love," I said. "I was scared. I didn't want you to feel abandoned like I did." She stood up, tears running down her cheeks. You should have trusted me with the truth. I reached for her hand, but she pulled away. She walked to the window, staring out into the yard. All those years, she said softly. All those questions I had. And you just let me believe he was dead. I couldn't look at her. I just sat there, my heart breaking, knowing there were no words that could fix this. She turned to me. Did he ever know about me? I shook my head. He found out later. I told him too late. And by then, it was already over. Grace covered her face, trying to hold in her sobs. After a long silence, she said, I need to go. Grace, please. But she was already walking toward the door. She stopped at the doorway and looked back. You always told me honesty mattered more than anything. You built my whole life on that lesson. But you couldn't even be honest with me. And then she left. The door closed behind her, and the sound echoed through the house like thunder. That night, I couldn't sleep. I walked into her old room, the one with the faded pink curtains and the bookshelf still filled with her childhood books. I sat on her bed, holding one of her old stuffed toys, and cried like a child myself. I wanted to call her to explain more, but I didn't know what to say. What could I possibly say to make her understand that everything I did was for love? Days turned into weeks, and I didn't hear from her. I sent texts, left voicemails, nothing. She didn't answer. The silence felt worse than death. One evening, while cleaning, I found the box under the floorboard, the letters I'd written over the years. Some to David. Some to Grace. Words I never had the courage to say out loud. I sat there on the floor, surrounded by those letters, and realized I couldn't run anymore. If I wanted my daughter to ever forgive me, I had to face what I'd done, all of it. So I wrote her one last letter. In it, I told her everything. How I met David. How I loved him. How scared I was when he left. How I ran away, trying to build a life for her out of the ashes of my own. I told her how sorry I was for lying, and how every time I looked at her, I saw both the man who broke my heart and the miracle that saved me. I told her I never meant to take the truth from her. I just wanted her to have a better life than I did. I sealed the letter and left it on her doorstep one morning. Then I went to the cemetery. I hadn't been there in years. David was buried on a small hill under an old oak tree. I brought a single white rose. I stood there for a long time, the wind blowing softly through the leaves. I told her, I whispered. I finally told her the truth. And for the first time in 30 years, I felt something inside me loosen. The guilt was still there, but it wasn't choking me anymore. When I got home, the house was quiet. I sat by the window, waiting, not knowing if my daughter would ever come back. Hours passed. The sky turned dark. Then I heard a car pull into the driveway. My heart began to race. I looked out and saw her standing there, holding the letter in her hand. Her eyes were red, her face pale. She walked up to the porch slowly, like she wasn't sure what to say. When she reached the door, she looked at me and whispered, I read it. I stood there, afraid to move. She took a deep breath. I don't know if I can forgive you yet, Mama. But I understand you now. Tears filled my eyes. That's all I ever wanted, baby. For you to understand. She stepped closer and hugged me. It wasn't a long hug, but it was real. It was enough. As she held me, I felt years of pain start to fade away. Not disappear, but fade, like a storm finally passing. That night, as we sat together in silence, watching the rain through the window, I realized something. Love and forgiveness are not the same thing, but they live in the same heart. And for the first time in a long time, I felt hope. After Grace left that night, I didn't sleep again. Even though she said she understood, I knew that understanding wasn't the same as forgiving. There was still a wall between us, invisible but strong. Days turned into weeks. We started talking again, but our conversations were careful, like walking on thin ice. We talked about the weather, her job, her deadlines, everything except the truth. Then one evening she called and asked, "Mama, can we talk?" Really talk? Something in her voice made my heart tighten. "Of course, honey," I said. She came over the next morning. It was quiet outside. The sky was pale blue, and there was a soft wind moving through the trees. She brought a folder with her, thick, worn out, filled with papers. I had a feeling I knew what it was. She sat down across from me, took a deep breath, and said, "I went back to Charleston." My hands went cold. "Grace." "I needed to know everything," she said softly. I talked to people who knew him. I even found the police report from his accident. She slid the folder across the table. I stared at it, afraid to touch it. Her eyes were calm but sad. "He didn't die in that crash right away, Mama. He made it to the hospital. The nurse who was there said he kept saying one name, yours." Tears welled in my eyes. I swallowed hard. "I didn't know," I whispered. Grace nodded. "I figured that. But there's more." She reached into her bag and pulled out an old cassette tape in a small plastic case. "His sister gave me this. He recorded it the night before the accident." She placed it gently on the table. I just stared at it, that small piece of plastic that somehow carried his voice across 30 years. "Do you want to hear it?" she asked quietly. I hesitated. My hands trembled as I reached for it. "Yes," I said finally. Grace had brought a little player. She pressed play. At first, there was static, then his voice came through. That deep, steady voice I hadn't heard in half a lifetime. "Evelyn," he said, his voice soft but clear, "I don't know if this will ever reach you. I don't even know if you'd want to hear from me. But if you do, I want you to know, I never stopped loving you. Not for a single day." I pressed my hand over my mouth as tears streamed down my face. He continued, "I made mistakes. I was weak. I let fear ruin everything. But if you're hearing this, I want you to tell our child that I'm sorry. I didn't know how to be the man you both needed, but I wanted to try. I was going to drive to you tomorrow. I wanted to make it right." Then silence. The tape clicked, ending the message. Grace sat there quietly, watching me. I couldn't speak. The room felt full of ghosts, not just his, but the person I used to be. She finally said, "He loved you, Mama. He really did." I nodded, my voice shaking. "I know. I just didn't believe it back then. I thought he'd chosen someone else. I thought he'd forgotten me." Grace's eyes softened. "Why did you think that?" I sighed deeply. "Because when I told him about you, he didn't answer my letter. I waited for months. I was alone, pregnant, scared. Then I heard he got engaged to another woman. I ran away. I wanted to protect you from all that pain." Grace looked down. "His sister told me something different. He never got that letter, Mama. His fiancée found it and hid it from him. He thought you disappeared because you stopped loving him." I froze. The air left my lungs. For a moment I couldn't move. I just sat there, staring at her, feeling 30 years of misunderstanding crash down like waves. All this time, both of us had been living in two different versions of the same story. Grace reached across the table and held my hand. "He didn't leave you, Mama. He was looking for you until the day he died." I broke down. I couldn't hold it anymore. I cried like I hadn't cried in years, deep, shaking sobs that came from somewhere far inside. Grace held my hand tighter. "You didn't ruin anything, Mama. You just didn't know. But I did ruin something. I ruined time. I ruined what could have been." That night, after she left, I went into my bedroom, and pulled out the old photo album I'd hidden for years. I flipped through pictures of me and him, the beach, the fair, the porch light that used to shine outside our small apartment. We looked so young, so sure that love was enough. I whispered to the photo, "I'm sorry." The next morning, I woke up feeling different, lighter but hollow. The truth had finally surfaced, and now all that was left was the ache of what couldn't be fixed. Grace started visiting more after that. Sometimes we didn't talk much, we just sat together. It felt like healing, slow, fragile healing. One evening she said, "Mama, do you think people can love again after everything?" I smiled sadly. "I think love never really dies. It just changes its shape." She nodded, looking thoughtful. "I've been thinking about forgiveness. Not just for you, for myself too. I've been angry for so long. Maybe it's time I let that go." I felt tears in my eyes again, but they weren't painful this time. "I'd like that, Grace." A few days later, she surprised me. She said she wanted to write a story, not for her magazine, but for herself. She called it The Woman Who Loved Too Quietly. She told me it wasn't about blame or anger. It was about choices, and how love sometimes makes us do things we don't even understand. She read me the first few lines one evening, her voice calm and soft. "My mother once told me that love is both a blessing and a punishment." I used to think she meant heartbreak. Now I think she meant silence, the kind we build around ourselves to protect others until it becomes a cage. When she finished reading, I couldn't speak. I just reached for her hand and held it. A few weeks later, she asked me something unexpected. "Mama, would you like to visit his grave with me?" My chest tightened. I hadn't been ready for that, not with her. But something in her tone told me it was time. So we went. It was a warm afternoon, with a gentle breeze moving through the cemetery. The same oak tree stood over his grave, strong and quiet. Grace brought a small bouquet of white lilies. We stood there in silence for a long time. I could hear birds in the distance, the soft rustle of leaves, the hum of the world still moving on. Grace knelt down and placed the flowers on the grave. Then she looked at me. "Do you want to say something?" I nodded, stepping closer. My voice trembled as I spoke. "David, I don't know if you can hear me. But I'm sorry for everything. I should have trusted love more. I should have stayed. You deserved the truth, and so did our daughter. I hope you can forgive me." Grace slipped her arm around me. "He would forgive you, Mama. I know he would." Tears streamed down my face, but they felt different this time, cleansing, not heavy. As we walked back to the car, Grace said, "You know, I think he'd be proud of us. You for surviving, and me for finally finding the truth." I smiled softly. Maybe he would. That evening, we drove home with the windows down, the sun setting behind us. The sky was painted with gold and pink, like something beautiful was finally allowed to breathe again. When we got home, Grace hugged me tightly. "I love you, Mama," she whispered. I held her close. "I love you too, baby. Always." And in that moment, I realized something simple but powerful. Love may get lost, twisted, or buried under years of silence, but it never really disappears. It just waits until we're brave enough to look for it again. For the first time in 30 years, I wasn't haunted anymore. The past still hurt, yes, but it no longer controlled me. Grace and I sat together that night on the porch, watching fireflies dance in the dark. She leaned her head on my shoulder, and I felt peace settle deep in my bones. I thought about David, about the letter, about the young woman I used to be. And then, softly, I whispered to the stars, "We're okay now." It's been 6 months since Grace, and I stood by David's grave. Life feels different now, not perfect, not easy, but real. The kind of quiet you feel after a long storm. The kind that doesn't mean everything's fine, but that everything's finally settled. Grace comes by almost every weekend now. Sometimes we talk, sometimes we don't. We've learned that silence can be healing too. There are mornings when I wake up and make coffee for both of us, and she sits at the table writing. I like watching her hair falling over her face, the soft furrow in her brow when she's deep in thought. She's always been so much like me, and yet stronger in ways I never was. The story she wrote, The Woman Who Loved Too Quietly, got published in a small online magazine. She didn't use our names, but everyone who knew us understood. People wrote comments saying how deeply it touched them, how it made them think about their own mothers, their own secrets. She told me she didn't write it to expose me. She wrote it to understand me. And somehow, through her words, we both found peace. But healing isn't a straight line. Some days are harder than others. There are moments when I catch her looking at me, not angry, not hurt, just thinking. I know she's still trying to make sense of it all. And that's okay. Forgiveness doesn't happen in a day. It grows slowly, like sunlight through clouds. Last week, she surprised me again. She said, "Mama, I want to take you somewhere." We drove for hours through open roads, the sky wide and endless. When we finally stopped, we were by the ocean, a quiet beach in North Carolina where no one else was around. "This is where I go when I need to think," she said. We sat in the sand, side by side, watching the waves roll in. The sound of the sea has always calmed me, even back when I was young. After a while, Grace said softly, "I think I finally understand why you did it." I turned to her, unsure what she meant. "You were trying to protect me," she said. "You were scared, and you thought silence was love. But love isn't about silence, Mama. It's about truth. Even when it hurts." I nodded slowly. "You're right. I thought I was keeping you safe. I see now I was just keeping you away." She smiled gently. "You did your best. I can see that now." Tears filled my eyes. "That means more than you know." We sat there quietly, watching the water. The sun began to set, a deep orange glow spreading across the horizon. Grace picked up a small seashell, twirling it in her fingers. "You know, I used to imagine my father as a hero when I was a kid. Then I imagined him as a ghost. Now I just see him as human. I think that's progress." I laughed softly, wiping a tear. "He'd be proud of you. You have his heart." She looked at me. "And your strength." For a long moment, we didn't say anything. The sky turned pink, the waves turned silver, and the world felt still. I closed my eyes and whispered a small prayer, not for forgiveness anymore but for gratitude. For the love that somehow survived everything. When we drove home that night, Grace turned on the radio. An old song came on, one David used to love. It was soft, slow, the kind of song you hum without realizing. Grace smiled faintly. "You used to listen to this a lot, didn't you?" I nodded. "All the time. He used to sing it to me." She glanced at me, then turned up the volume. For a few minutes, we just drove, the music wrapping around us like a memory that didn't hurt anymore. When she dropped me off at home, she didn't rush to leave. She came inside, helped me make tea, and sat by the window. The rain started falling lightly outside. "Mama," she said softly, "I know you always say if I knew what you did for love, I'd never forgive you." I smiled sadly. I used to believe that. She looked at me for a long time before speaking again. "But I think you were wrong. Because now I do know. And I do forgive you." Those words, I don't think I'll ever forget them. It felt like something deep inside me finally unlocked, like I could breathe again for the first time in years. I reached for her hand, my voice trembling. "You have no idea what that means to me." She squeezed my hand. "I do, Mama. I do." We sat there for a while, just holding hands, listening to the sound of the rain. Forgiveness doesn't erase the past, it just changes the way it lives in your heart. It turns pain into understanding, regret into peace. I think about David often now, but not with guilt anymore. When I dream of him, I see him smiling. Sometimes I imagine him looking down at us, proud, at peace, maybe even laughing softly at how life turned out. I still keep his letter in the drawer beside my bed. Some nights I take it out and read it again. Not because I'm sad, but because it reminds me that love, in all its mistakes and mess, was real. It existed. And that's enough. A few weeks later, Grace asked me to join her at a small local event. She said they were honoring writers from her magazine. When she went up to speak, she started by thanking her editors and readers. Then, she paused. I also want to thank someone who taught me the hardest, most beautiful lesson I've ever learned, my mother, she said, looking right at me. She taught me that love isn't about perfection. It's about trying, even when you're terrified. About choosing someone over and over, even when it hurts. People clapped softly. I felt my eyes fill again. Afterward, she came down from the stage and hugged me tightly. That was for you, she whispered. And I thought, this is what healing looks like. Not a grand moment, not a perfect ending, but two broken hearts learning to beat together again. Now, every morning, when I make my coffee and open the window, the sunlight feels different. It feels like a blessing. Like something new. Grace visits often, and we talk about everything, her job, her plans, her hopes. Sometimes she tells me about a man she's seeing, and I can tell she's scared of love, the same way I once was. I tell her, it's okay to be scared. But don't run from it, Grace. Love will hurt, but it will also heal. Let it find you. She smiles. I will, Mama. I promise. We've both come a long way. There are still ghosts, still moments of pain, but there's also laughter now, soft, honest laughter that fills the spaces where regret used to live. And sometimes, late at night, I think about how everything started. How one choice, one lie, changed our lives. If my daughter knew what I did for love, she'd never forgive me. That used to be my biggest fear. But now, I know better. Because forgiveness isn't something you earn. It's something given by someone brave enough to see the whole truth, the pain, the love, the mistakes, and still choose to stay. Grace did that for me. And in doing so, she gave me something I never thought I'd have again, peace. I look at her now, grown, wise, kind, and I realize that maybe everything I did, every wrong turn, every tear, somehow led us here. To this moment. To this quiet kind of love that asks for nothing except honesty. If David could see us now, I think he'd smile. Because in the end, the story wasn't about loss. It was about love finding its way back, through time, through pain, through forgiveness. And maybe that's what love truly is, not what survives the storm but what grows after it.